the universe. 24 hours of music and talk. Radio without limits. That's why people keep coming back for more. That's ubnradio.com.
Welcome to Both Sides Now, featuring the unconventional duo, Dr. Shirley and Medium Kellee White. Two perspectives, one world. This is Both Sides Now.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Both Sides Now. I'm Dr. Shirley.
And I'm Medium Kellee White.
And who do we have on today, Kelly?
Oh, I'm so excited. Today we have a very special guest. His name is E.M. Nicolay. And I'm going to read his bio because it's an incredible bio. And we call him Gene. So E.M. Nicolay, Gene, is an internationally known intuitive, remote viewer, author, workshop leader, and coach who has dedicated himself to assisting individuals, organizations, and businesses to access higher guidance through a better understanding of their higher self, their life purpose, and their soul's journey or essence path. For nearly 2 decades, he has worked with thousands of individuals to explore the spiritual, energetic, and karmic patterns that influence the manifestation of their day-to-day reality. Early in his awakened career, he was asked to assist several Jungian psychotherapists with particularly difficult cases by helping them uncover and delve into the metaphysical, karmic, and archetypal mysteries hidden within their patients' specific patterns, phobias, and conditions. His reputation as a gifted, intuitive healer and remote viewer quickly grew internationally as he has worked with psychotherapists, healers, metaphysicians, clerics, individuals, business owners, and others to help understand the nature of life experiences through a better understanding of their essence path and the multidimensional nature of the universe. Wow. Well, welcome, Gene, to our show today.
Hi, Kelly.
Hi
Dr.
there.
Shirley. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, my
Yes.
gosh, Gene, I'm hoping that you can start off by telling us about your background.
Yeah, I mean, welcome, Gene. And I do want to hear about those Jungian psychotherapists. But yeah, how did you get into this? This is fascinating stuff.
Well, I always, even as a child, I was the kid from the Sixth Sense.
Oh, wow.
Who always, at the age of 5 or 6, would say something like, Uncle so-and-so was just here to say goodbye. And they would say to me, what are you talking about? And stop talking like that. And then an hour later, someone would call to say that Uncle so-and-so had passed away unexpectedly.
Wow.
So that was always kind of my experience. Then as I grew older, naturally, we're sort of taught that kind of thing really can't come up in public, and that we probably should try and be a lot more left brain and not as much right brain. And so in high school and in college, you put that aside as best as you can, even though you still have experiences. And then I went into a very corporate world, worked for international companies, doing marketing, and was actually very successful at it, even though there are times when I think that I was very successful because I actually did have a certain sense. And I was the guy who, when the CEO wanted to know what was going to happen, would come in and say, well, what do you think about this? And I would say, well, I think that in 5 years, the company is not going to be there, and it won't bother you at all, so you don't have to worry about it. And then in 3 years, he would pass away, and in 5 years, the company would be bought and dissected and sold.
Wow.
So I always had that kind of experience. And then something interesting happened to me. In about the mid to late 90s, I had a friend who asked if I could please help out, as sort of just a side thing, in my spare time, a psychotherapist friend who wanted to create some marketing materials. And I did it, and she was very, very thankful, and she kept calling me up and saying, I really want to do something for you because I had done it as a favor. didn't charge anything for it. She said, please, please, I need to do something for you. Just come for a session. She was also a hypnotist. And she said, come for a session, and, anytime that you want. So oddly enough, I had a very, very important meeting that was a presentation to a company in New York. And I said, maybe I'll take her up on the hypnosis thing, and maybe she can kind of hypnotize me and give me some calming suggestions for this meeting, which was going to be, very high executives. I went to her office, and she said, easy, no problem, and she started to put me under. And I am a trance medium, so I go into trance very, very easily. And at some point, early on, I had to say to her, could you please stop talking, because she was still putting me under. I'm trying to hear what's being said here to my right. And I heard a voice very clearly that was a very loving voice that said to me, this is how she helps people. But if you choose, now is the time for you to help people in ways that you can never imagine. And that led to an awakening where within weeks I was seeing auras. And again, I was having the spiritual experiences that I probably had when I was a child. And she was part and parcel, the woman who was the therapist. And she actually, I went to her a couple more times, and she taped some of the sessions. And the information that was being received was extraordinary. From that particular point, she said, well, I have some very interesting cases. Would it be okay, because with the permission of the client, could I maybe consult with you about some of the harder, more difficult situations that they're having? And that was a phenomenal success. And we began to be able to get insight into why people were having the issues that they were having, what the blocks were that they were sort of, was in their psyche or was it physically in their body, what their life lesson was all about, and how this all came together so that they could consciously work on changing the patterns that had become grooves in their life that were making them, if not miserable, at least very challenged. She then worked with a Jungian psychotherapist who was very well known in New York and in New Jersey, who was a professor. And I'm not going to mention any names, and he has since passed away, but he was very well respected and very well known. And he was her mentor. He was also her therapist. And she began telling him about some of these extraordinary breakthroughs that her patients were having. He then decided that he was going to do an experiment and see what this was all about. And needless to say, he started then asking for assistance with his patients, and he actually started then sending his patients to me for a pre-consult where we would discuss and discover what their life mission was, what their personality traits were, why they had chosen the environment that they had chosen to grow up in childhood, how that affected the way in which their life mission was unfolding in life, and what essentially was going on. He had just tremendous success with this, and because he was someone who was very well known, most of the people that he dealt with were healers themselves. They were therapists, they were doctors, there were monks, there were priests, there were people who really worked in all aspects of the healing profession and the metaphysical professions, spiritual professions, and they started referring each other. That eventually led to getting a call and this is a story that it's a very long story and I won't get into it too much, but that eventually led to being contacted by some companies that actually were, let's call them front companies for government organizations. And at that particular point, I was traveling around the world consulting, in quotes, with various diplomats and various people about what would transpire almost as a remote viewer. Wow. And did that for a while until I was approached by a group that wanted me to do this, and I kind of decided that I wanted to go down a different path.
Gene, can you explain to the audience what a remote viewer is?
Yeah, a remote viewer is essentially, there was a program that was actually created with the Defense Department, and I forget exactly what decade it was, but it wasn't too long ago. A remote viewer is an intuitive, someone who has psychic abilities and intuitive abilities, the abilities of a medium, who can actually, when they focus on, or when they're asked to focus on a specific item or a specific country or something specific, can actually tune in and see it from a metaphysical standpoint and give you the background of it, what it looks like, what might be transpiring with it, what might be coming up for it on the timeline, and different things like that. There was a program that was run by the Defense Department, and I think that they've since, or I think there was a point at which they canceled it, and of course they've denied it forever. But nonetheless, that's what a remote viewer is. Essentially, a remote viewer is a psychic or an intuitive who is working with someone and being asked to project themselves outward and see things at a distance.
So kind of like a psychic spy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very similar.
Yeah, very much so.
Wow.
Very much so.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
In fact, there's a TV show.
And you know, the way they work is very funny. It's kind of an interesting story, but most of this transpires with what I'm going to call front companies. Companies that actually are legitimate companies that act as though they're selling something, and they actually might sell something internationally, but there is a lot going on behind the scenes that nobody really knows about. Mm-hmm. And they will come in and they will kind of they know what you're doing, and you know what they're doing, but they nonetheless only will tell you as much as they think that you should know. So they will come in and they will say something like, so how do you feel about South Africa today? And they will ask you to write a report on South Africa and to look at it upwards, backwards, forwards, upside down, every which way, what's coming up. And that's essentially how it works. I got a little nervous and turned off because I saw them trying to use a lot of the mind control techniques that I knew about on me. And at that particular point, I got very, very wary and decided that I would follow a different route. And to tell you the truth, it wasn't easy to get away from them, and for years afterwards, I would recognize them, from a half a block away, following me.
wow.
It's part of the reason why I kind of tend to be anonymous in terms of this material, because I really do want the material to get out there and have the material be what is important. And we talked about that, I'm not really into trying to create any kind of cult or any kind of celebrity. This is material and information that if it can be of service to you, if it can be of help to you, I'm more than willing to, provide it to you. But it's up to you to actually take it and use it in whatever way. So,
Well, and I think that's something so, in this day and age, so original about you. And that's why, for those of you watching the show today, that we don't have a picture of Gene on, because it's not, as you said, it's not about you or who you are. It's the information that, you're providing.
It was a channel, basically, right?
yeah.
So, I'm curious, in if you can give maybe an example of maybe the most illustrating one of when you were working with the psychologist or even the Jungian psychologist as to what came up maybe with one of the patients and how it helped, just kind of as an example.
Okay. A lot of the material that we deal with, it's called the essence path material because it really is about discovering your soul path, discovering your essence path consciously. What that means is that from our perspective, when you come into the lifetime, your soul projects you into the lifetime. You're essentially a spiritual being wearing a physical body. Mm-hmm. And your soul, in conjunction with your soul, you decide that this is what my life mission is going to be about. This is what I'm going to be learning in the lifetime. And I'm also going to create for this lifetime certain physical parameters, certain environmental factors. I'm going to pick the parents that I'm going to have because they're going to create this or that in my psychological makeup. They're going to create the perspective with which I kind of interpret the world, mm-hmm. and that is going to assist me to actually fulfill my life mission, what I'm trying to learn in this lifetime. And in fulfilling that life mission, I'm going to be able to express my soul's energy because that is my ultimate objective, is to resonate with my soul energy and express it in the lifetime. Mm-hmm. Now, because of the third dimension, because of the dimensional foray that we're in, the world that we're in, this particular dimension, and most of them to an extent, is based on polarity. So there is negative and positive. There's yin and yang. There is up and down, et cetera, et cetera. But what this really means is that your life mission can be experienced from either the positive aspect or from the negative aspect. Now, what I mean by that is that, and this will be interesting to you, let's say a life mission is not, do I want to be a doctor or a lawyer? A life mission is, I want to learn something about creation, about how to create, about life. So a typical life mission might be, as an example, that I want to learn lessons around acceptance. When I'm learning those lessons in the positive polarity, I'm going to learn those lessons of acceptance in my life by being very accepting, by accepting other people, by having other people accept me for who I am, by being very open, and by having acceptance. Now, on the other hand, I can learn this lesson from the negative polarity. And you have to remember, there's no right or wrong or good or bad about polarity. It just happens to be, negative or positive. And your higher self, your soul, is really not at all concerned with, what's good or bad or what you consider to be good or bad or right or wrong, because that's very subjective for this lifetime. All it knows is that you have chosen in this lifetime to learn about lessons regarding acceptance. And what happens is you then can learn about acceptance through acceptance, or through the negative polarity, you can learn about acceptance through rejection. What that means is that you can be rejected, you can be abandoned in childhood, you can be abandoned by a parent, you can have constantly experiences of rejection, of being rejected by people, by society, by communities. What ultimately it boils down to is that then you ultimately reject yourself. But you're still learning about acceptance. It's like if your mission was about to learn lessons of love, you can learn lessons of love through very loving experiences, or you can learn lessons of love by having very hateful experiences. But naturally, the way in which you want to have this experience is going to be through the positive polarity and having lessons of love or acceptance through loving experiences and through being accepted, not through, hateful situations and difficult situations or being rejected, which is going to be far more challenging for you. Now, this gets a little bit more complex, and I won't get too far into it, but I do want to explain that in conjunction with this, you choose to have certain traits built around your personality that are the reason why you choose a certain environment to grow up in, the reason why you choose certain things to happen to you in childhood, the reason why you choose certain parents to create these personality sort of attributes that you're going to have. And those personality attributes are then expressed in conjunction with and are actually what tempers the way in which your life mission will unfold. So I'm just going to give an example off the top of my head from a typical case. Say that your personality is related to, your personality attribute is related to learning about holding on. You're fearful, in the negative polarity, you're fearful that you're not going to have enough of what you need. In the positive polarity, you have faith and you're confident that you're going to have everything possible and that you're going to have what you need. Now, when your life is being experienced in the positive polarity, then using these parameters, you will become very content, you will feel very satisfied, you won't have fear, you'll believe that you're going to have everything that you need. That actually creates a vibrational resonance around you, that frame of thought. In other words, those thoughts that become actions as you think them, create a vibrational resonance around you that pushes out into the world, and then it attracts people and situations to you that ultimately will be accepting of you, and then you will feel accepted, and you will be able to best express your soul's energy in life. Mm-hmm. Now, on the other hand, if that was going to occur from the negative polarity, you would be fearful that you're not going to have enough in your life, and you would spend all your time trying to hold on to what you have. And the tighter you hold on to what you have, whether it be love or money or anything energetic, it would slip through your fingers. Now that would then create a different kind of vibrational resonance around you, and that vibrational resonance that would be created would actually then go out into the world through your thought process and through your vibrational resonance, and it would start to repel things from you, so that you would find that people are rejecting you. You are feeling rejected. Situations are rejecting you. And then ultimately you would feel rejected and you would reject yourself. This would create certain blockages that would ultimately, over a very long period of time, create blockages in the chakra system that would then manifest themselves physically, and that ultimately would lead possibly to dis-ease or to certain situations that you would then have to encounter, which would then add to the complexity and add to your challenge. So
Gene, I have a question for you. Can you change from one polarity to another? If you're on a path of negativity, can you get to a positive place?
Positively. And that is the whole object of what we're trying to show people, and that's the object of the material. It's to demonstrate that by becoming conscious of what these features are that you have and what your soul's mission is, what you're trying to learn in this lifetime, becoming conscious of it is a way of actually then pushing it into the positive. So as an example, in the situation or the case that we're talking about, if you are feeling yourself tightening up and holding on to life and holding on to money and holding on to people and holding on to love because you're afraid you're going to lose it, becoming conscious of that, you can say, wait a minute, I don't have to go here. Let me try and have faith. Let me consciously try and divert this and turn it into the positive polarity so that I'm pushing out energy that is going to attract the positive polarity, meaning acceptance, rather than the negative situations that are going to be far more challenging for me.
So that's so interesting, because what you're saying, and it is very similar to some of the work that we do as therapists, is looking for the pattern, the similar pattern in experiences. You know,
Yes.
we may see it. For example, I teach if someone gets into one bad relationship after another, you look for the pattern of the type of men they're choosing to gain information and some insight into what the work may be or what you may need to heal or work on. And you're kind of suggesting that kind of overall in life to look at that pattern to let you know what you came here to experience, and if it's on the negative side, you can transform it to have more positive experiences.
Absolutely true. Absolutely the case. And I'm saying that you can, by looking at it from a metaphysical standpoint, in addition to, doing the work that you're doing, you can actually then kind of get a little bit more insight into what is going on with you, why you chose this, why certain things are happening, which is then sort of the first and probably the largest step in actually trying to correct it and live your life from the positive polarity. Now, there are issues related, and it does get a little bit more complex because, there is such a thing as karma. And karma I take to mean the balancing of energy from past or future lifetimes. Mm-hmm. There are things that happen. Someone might come into the lifetime handicapped for specific reasons, as an example. And that karma then does have to be experienced. But even that can be ultimately dealt with in a positive fashion and from a positive perspective, ultimately, if you become conscious and if you raise your vibrational frequency, and what we call being more conscious and having conscious intention.
Mm-hmm. And that's so interesting that I'm seeing so many parallels because, what we found is that in order to change a habit or something that we're doing that we don't want to do, we need to have conscious, focused attention to it. And that will then rewire the brain to change.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly right. You're exactly right.
That's
now what I try and do then is I try and offer people kind of a little bit of a shortcut to trying to understand from a metaphysical standpoint and from a spiritual standpoint, what could your life mission be, and what are these traits that are blocking you, and what are the patterns that have been created? But essentially, it's exactly the same thing that you are ultimately doing.
So, given that I love shortcuts, how do you work? I mean, do you do private sessions, and if someone wanted a private session with you, how would they go about it? I'm not speaking about me, but I am. And so, is it something how does someone go about doing that with you?
Well, like I said, I've done literally thousands of them over the years, and just by word of mouth, the demand just became overwhelming. So I'm really not able to do it anymore. The other issue that I have is that this can be, and Kellee might be able to speak to this too, this kind of work, the kind of work that I do, can be incredibly draining. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I truly do tune in to a higher vibrational pattern. I am taking information from your guides, from various higher guides, and from the Akashic records, and that requires you to we're physical beings, and we're in the third dimension still. And the way my guides have put it is, it really is like taking a lightning bolt and putting it down a copper filament.
Yeah.
It is essentially, I think, one of the difficulties of doing this kind of work for most healers and most people who actually do this kind of work. It can be very energetically draining. And so because I have really, at this particular point, after doing this for, more than a decade and close to 2 decades, I've decided that where I really want to put my focus is using this particular talent and using that energy to create books and information that everyone can access instead of just one-on-one.
That makes sense, and I do understand. It is deep work when you go into, you're dealing with guides and you're dealing with the Akashic records, and I mean, it can be exhausting, actually.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I'm very careful. I mean, I am really someone who really wants to be truthful about this and upfront. It took me the longest time to really even realize that what was happening was real, because I just kept asking, and I want it to be truth. I want it to be truth. And so, when you do that kind of work and you really are being truthful about it, it's something that is incredibly draining, and it really requires just a phenomenal feat. And there are physical effects truly. The pineal gland, the pituitary gland, your hormonal system can have effects, so that you really do have to say, okay, I only have so much energy, and I'm going to be very careful now about how I use it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, that makes sense. Tell us about your books, the books that you've written.
Well, the books, we're on the fourth book of the Essence Path series, and I think they're very interesting. The first two books kind of set the groundwork. It's a compilation of the information that we've received at various group workshops and group sessions. And by the way, I do group workshops. So people who are interested can go to the website and they can look, and that we do. I don't do private ones anymore because it's too much, but we do group ones. And their questions, there is an interactive part to it. But the first two books then are Discovering Your Essence Path.
Mm-hmm.
The first book is your life path, your soul path, and other quintessential information. And the second one is called Fear, Faith, and Physical Reality. These tend to be kind of the basis of the information, of the Essence Path information. And it covers a wide range of things, everything from descriptions of the dream state and the astral state to, everything that we've just talked about, and, what is illness, where does it come from, what is disease, what are chakras, what's really going on, that kind of thing. From there, we departed to a second book, or it's actually a third book in the series. It's called The System Lords and the 12 Dimensions. It's a book that actually is a description of the universe, how the universe is set up, what it's all about, a lot of that esoteric information that you kind of get a little here and a little there and a little here, kind of compiled and from our perspective, from the Essence Path perspective.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It was a book that actually began because there was just such a wild, crazy, outlandish kind of the end of the world is happening in 2012, and I'm sure you remember all of that.
Yeah.
And that was all about kind of setting the record straight. What's really going to happen? No, it's what's really going on. Who really were the Mayans? All of these types of things, and there's a I'm going to call it a metaphorical sort of device that the guides have used that we call the System Lords. Now, this gets interesting, especially in what's sort of coming up here in the future. The System Lords are ninth dimensional avatars who, because of their high transcendence, are able to actually come back to lower dimensional arenas and will incarnate into actual lifetimes. And now these avatars, they don't know that they're walking around and that they're incarnates of avatars, but that they actually are individuals who are incarnated, who are living lives, who have missions, who have normal lifetimes, but they are linked to these higher avatars. Because there are two polarities in the third dimension, these avatars will take the form of what they call the physical System Lord or the spiritual System Lord. There can be many at the same time. But essentially what this boils down to is Christ consciousness and Antichrist consciousness. And that's sort of where the whole Christ consciousness, Antichrist consciousness sort of comes from. The physical System Lord, who is the Antichrist consciousness, essentially when they incarnate in order to come into positions of world power or business or what have you. And this does not mean that they don't have to all be great people. They can be just very average, normal people. But they're essentially, what their mission is to change the geopolitical status of the planet.
For the better or for the worse?
Well, I mean, again, they have a mission, and we're now out of the realm of good or bad. We're into the realm of what's the reason why this is being created, and they are a countersink and they are a counterbalance. And here's the thing, and that's why it is an interesting question, because the the Antichrist consciousness, which is the physical system lord, will create geopolitical change, while the spiritual system lord, the Christ consciousness, will come in and create spiritual change and enlightenment. There are times when the spiritual system lord will come first, and then physical system lords will come. And there are times when physical system lords will come, and then they will pave the way through sometimes even mass destruction for enlightenment and for a whole new era to prosper and to come into being. And that would be then when the spiritual system lord will appear.
So, without putting you on the spot, I'm curious if, these events that happened in Paris, a few weeks ago, and have to do with what you're talking about.
They do indirectly, and that, first of all, it's a terrible, terrible tragedy.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
I'm sure, I hope that the people of France and Paris know that we stand with them.
Oh, yes.
But what is very interesting about this is that, and this actually leads to the new book. The most recent book is called Timeline Collapse and Universal Ascension, which is essentially the history of the world and the third dimension up until 2569. What is going on here is that there is a splitting off of the third dimension and the fifth dimension. Now, I'm sure you've heard the word ascension, and there's a lot of misinformation about what ascension is all about. Ascension is actually the evolutionary process of the universe. Planets go through it, entire dimensions go through it, individual souls go through it. And what's happening here is that our dimension, the third dimension, is in the process of ascension, and it is evolving, and it is changing. When it actually changes, most human angelic souls that are incarnated on Earth will actually be moving on to a fifth dimensional version of Earth in their next lifetimes that is called Terra. But there will still be a third dimensional Earth that will emerge, which is essentially the new third dimension. And it gets complex, so I don't want to get too far into it, except for to say that at the current time, the reason why you have such a rift between certain segments of society, and I'm going to say those who are much younger souls, who are very fundamentally oriented, who want, they're like children, really. What is the key sign of a baby? A baby wants, there's me and there's other me's. And I want everyone to be just like me. And if you're not like me, I'm going to force you to be like me.
Right.
And then there are older souls. And these older souls, most of the human angelics who are incarnated currently, are going to be cycling off to these fifth dimensional lifetimes. Those are individuals who are older souls who kind of, they want to live in peace. They want to live in unity. They want to enjoy life, and they want to experience life. And, essentially what you see with a good deal of people who are, not everyone, but a good deal of people who are in kind of the Western Hemisphere. Now, that brings us to what's actually transpiring now. The rift between those in the third dimension, who are going to remain in the third dimension incarnations, who are essentially baby souls, and those who are ultimately going to be cycling off, is becoming larger and larger because we're in this process of evolution and we're going through the cycle currently. You have to remember, and I'm sure you know this, that fundamentalists on our side of the Atlantic, in terms of some of what you'll call the Christian fundamentalists, can be just as maniacal about I want everyone to be like me as some of the people on the other side. So what do you see happening here? You see happening that these are individuals on either side of the equation, like opposite sides of the coin, who are beginning to square off, who are beginning to cause all kinds of problems, who ultimately will lead us to a very devastating period that is a very challenging time that is detailed in the new book, Timeline Collapse, essentially because they will be the inheritors of the third dimension, because they want to continue on in incarnations where they have karmic endeavors, where they learn through karma, where they kind of essentially continue to grow. Everyone else eventually will start to cycle off, and there will be pockets in the world where there's very high enlightenment and very conscious individuals, and there will be pockets of the world where there are essentially, very young souls with very narrow minds and very fundamentalist views. Now, in terms of the Paris thing and my take on it, just very quickly, when we looked at the information, as this is happening, when the first strike came on 9/11, it was very symbolic in the sense that it was this fundamentalist group and these third-dimensional younger souls striking at the brain of the Western world. Shortly after that, they blew up a lot of the, in Afghanistan, they blew up a lot of the giant Buddhas. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
When they did that, they were striking at the heart of the world. They have, in attacking Paris this time, they are striking at the essentially what is and could be considered the soul of the Western world.
Do you think, Gene, that's why everybody has felt so just heartbroken and sad?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And then now this does represent a final declaration of war, essentially. And I would go as far as to say that what we probably haven't understood as yet is that the Third World War already began. And unfortunately, it will be a very, very difficult and challenging time for the West. That's the bad news. The good news is that there will still be pockets of enlightenment and of consciousness, while those of us who are going to be transcending and starting new incarnations at a higher dimension will live in, and so we will be protected. But it will definitely be a difficult time as this transition takes place over the coming 250 years, more or less.
Wow. My goodness.
Now, you mentioned that there were human angelic souls. Can you define what that means exactly? Because some people believe that, angels can't take human form for an extended period of time. They can take it for a short period of time, but not for, be incarnated as an angel.
Yeah, we're not really talking about angels here.
Okay.
We're talking about the soul species. There are different species of souls, and the Earth and the as no matter what dimension you're talking about, the third dimensional Earth or fifth dimensional Terra or seventh dimensional Gaia, because of the overlap of dimensions overlap each other. So they all are existing essentially together. But this particular sector of the universe is designated as where what we call human angelic soul matrices, or human angelic souls, will incarnate on Earth. Now, this leads to an interesting story as well. So I'm not really talking about angels, although I consider the human soul to be angelic. Okay. What this really means, though, is that the human soul and its vibrational resonance, it holds the genetic keys and the coding for this segment of the universe, particularly related to Earth. But what has been happening over the course of roughly the last 100 years and very heavily in the last 50 years is that there has been a kind of alien bioinvasion of Earth that is taking place. Now, again, this gets very complicated, and we could probably do whole hours on this, but because of that, there are right now in human form, because all incarnations on Earth are going to be human, other than animal. There are alien souls who have begun incarnating in what I call hybrid human physical bodies and vehicles.
How would somebody recognize that?
Yeah, that sounds,
Well, this gets into some funny kind of information, the kind that a lot of people don't really like to talk about. But I know you've heard a lot about, let's say, as an example, the Greys as an alien species. They wreaked havoc in their particular segment of the third dimensional universe. They ripped a hole in their particular space. They have come back in time and are actually working together with a number of different governments internationally in exchange for technology, which has just flourished in the last 30, 40 years. They are attempting to create hybrid physical bodies that they can incarnate in. The way in which you basically tell them is that, or the way that you can tell them, and it certainly is not easy, but they tend to be individuals who don't have any empathy.
Okay. So we would recognize them as
sociopaths.
the sociopaths of the world.
You would in a way, yes,
Well,
definitely. They also many of them tend to be in positions of power, and that's not by accident.
Right.
And it's because they are changing things sort of from the top. Just so that I just want to say one thing about it, because this is really interesting. As human angelics begin to cycle off of this third dimension, they are attempting to come in full force, not realizing ultimately that the planet Earth itself in the third dimension will ultimately have dominance over them and will ultimately shake them off. And the reason why the book only gives the timeline until 2569 is because at that particular point there will be so many of these hybrid alien souls incarnated in physical human bodies that ultimately the Earth will orchestrate a worldwide catastrophe that will destroy the civilization and for the most part will wipe humans out, but will leave enough for there to be genetic seeds so that human angelics can incarnate again, and that will essentially be the end of what I call the alien bioinvasion of Earth. The sad part about this is that the things you see happening, this does get into a very strange part of kind of information, but chemtrails and scalar waves and all that kind of stuff and all that technology essentially is alien technology that is being used to alter the atmosphere. There is a lot of weaponization of nature that is being used by them, and when I say this, I don't mean that they know what they're doing. Although there are some who are actually working in conjunction with them, they don't realize that they are actually alien souls incarnated in human bodies. But ultimately, they have agreed to come incarnate in human form and work together with them to alter the environment, which ultimately will have devastating effects. Because, like I said, only human angelics have the genetic coding and the keys to the time portals and to the world. And I hope I'm not getting too out there for Dr. Shirley.
Well, I was just going to say, it's kind of sounding like,
a sci-fi movie.
Well, one of my favorite movies, The Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And I wonder if maybe the person who wrote that had, knew something or channeled something that they had no idea that they were channeling, because it does really, when you talk about the alien invasion and they come in, they look like us. It really sounds like that movie.
Also makes you think too when you say like, "Oh, that guy's a monster," or "That person's a monster." You
mean it.
You mean it. They,
Right.
I mean, literally, they
Right.
could be not
Right.
human in
Right.
some
Yeah.
way.
It's
Might be in human form, but not human. It's like, we talk about sociopaths and psychopaths, and or demons, as some people would refer to in human
Right.
form. That could
Right.
be,
Yes,
Right.
that's exactly right. Exactly.
yeah.
So for people,
And you brought up an interesting thing about channeling, and I do want to say also one of the reasons why what I do I don't call channeling is because when Michelangelo creates a masterpiece, it's not called channeling, but essentially that's what he's doing. When Albert Einstein is writing equations that he really could not know, and these different people are doing these things, everyone's channeling. So it really, everyone is connected in some way and channeling some way, which is why it's kind of a misnomer to talk about channeling, because the guy who wrote the Invasion of Byzance, he was probably channeling.
well, that's what I mean. There's some movies that kind of parody even Avatars. You mentioned that is feels like when you watch it, because it's so true to even in that soul connection and feeling someone, through the connection of the hair that there was, those scenes in Avatar that feel channeled. I mean, they feel kind of where otherworldly they do. So Jean, what can you share with because there's a lot of people that can already be a little paranoid with conspiracy theories and that kind of stuff, and now we have this information that you've just shared with us. But what can you maybe tell our listeners, something as to help maybe with the tool, or what we can do kind of in our everyday life, so we're not walking around feeling paranoid there's aliens amongst us and we can't trust anybody?
No.
And I mean, I'm
Absolutely.
of course blowing it out of proportion, but
it's a really great question. It's a really good point. We are all going through the period of ascension. We are all evolving at this particular point. One of the things that keeps us from ascending and keeps us from evolving is fear.
yeah.
Much of the conspiracy information that's out there, and much of what is being talked about, if you'll notice, and I hope that we really don't want to do that, and I hope that I don't do that. It generates fear.
Yeah.
And even when you see what's happening, around the world, when you see what happened in Paris, it is a direct effort from lower vibrational beings, entities, whatever you want to call them, to create fear. And one of the most important things that we can do is really have an understanding that we are protected, that we have a say in this, that we are empowered, and that we can have faith, and we must raise our resonance, we must raise our consciousness, raise our energy, and that the purpose of this kind of stuff is not to generate fear and make you go to a fearful place, but to have you say, I have jurisdiction. I have jurisdiction over myself, and I am going to raise my consciousness, and any information that I'm hearing is not to drive me into fear, but to make me actually raise my consciousness higher. There's an interesting thing that my guides say all the time. When you raise your vibration to a certain level, and you have a certain vibrational resonance and a certain consciousness, fear can no longer see you.
Wow.
Evil can no longer see you. Disease can no longer see you, because you are at a higher vibrational resonance, and your consciousness is such that you are not resonating in a way that will attract that to you.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, I'm so glad that you're saying this. Wow. Thank you so much. What would be, and maybe Kellee, you can join in since it's your area as well, what would be examples? How could someone raise their vibrational energy?
Well, the most immediate thing is that prayer and meditation is a divine gift. And I think it's wrong not to see it that way. And I think that the problem is that we're taught that you have to do it this way or that way, or say this or that, or whatever. That's not the case. Whatever resonates for you, whatever works for you, do it. But do it every day.
Yeah, develop a practice with it every day.
Make it a practice.
Make it a habit.
Make it a habit. Meditate. pray in whatever form you like, join together with like-minded people to meditate and pray. These are the things, that's the most immediate and important thing that you probably can do.
Take a moment to be grateful, have gratitude.
Absolutely. Because, and the reason for that is that all of that puts you into a state of grace. And grace is a resonance that actually will help you transcend and will lift you up to the point where, like I was saying, evil can no longer see you.
You know, that's so interesting. Thank you so much for that. You know, actually, one of my clients came in last week and there was a shift and it was different. And towards the end of the session, you know, he says, well, I don't know if this means anything or change anything, but I've started a gratitude journal. And it's just about writing 3 things at the end of the night that he was grateful for and choosing 3 different things and, you know, small things. It doesn't have to be huge things. And it seemed to have just shifted, you know, his energy and what you're talking about, Jean, that vibration. And it's something that can be so simple.
Absolutely, I think it's vital. The second thing that I would add to all of this is that, and this can be done through meditation and it can be done through prayer, but grounding is very important.
Yeah.
We tend to, heck, we walk around with rubber soles now and we're not grounded to the earth anymore. We need this energy that is flowing through us, and particularly, you know, not just natural energies, but energies that are man-made, that are flying around in the air that we don't see anymore, whether they be just phone or scalar or whatever they are. Those energies need to go through us and need to be grounded. The more that they actually take hold of you and are not grounded, the more that you begin on a cellular level to kind of get a little bit messed up, to have blockages and to lose control. So it becomes very important for you to ground yourself to the earth in some way.
And I always instruct my people to be barefoot, walk outside. If you can stand in sand, that's incredible. Or if you just are in grass, that's fabulous for yourself. And it really takes that energy and it just grounds it.
Right. And in that somatic technique is to notice your feet. Once you notice your feet, you know, we're so not aware of that. But once someone says, notice your feet, all of a sudden you can feel your feet and you can feel the ground.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And that really does, you know, that essentially is something that has to be done on a regular basis for you to raise your energy, for you to raise your consciousness and your vibrational energy.
So how wonderful, Jean. Thank you so much for sharing this with us.
Oh, Jean, I could listen to you
for
hours.
It's been a real pleasure.
Oh yeah, definitely. It was very, very
informative. we have 2 experts in the field here, John and Kellee.
Gosh.
Well, yeah, one thing I wanted to, before we go, when you were talking about aliens in human form, now there are positive aliens. I think the problem is that this world and the movie industry that we live in has demonized them in a major way. Do you see the positive ones coming in as well?
I think that's true. I think that there are positive ones. There certainly are ones that are acting to protect us and that are doing what they can. But you have to understand that the ones who are positive have a hands-off policy. And they are essentially we haven't talked about it, but there's a soul orientation. There's 2 soul orientations. Again, it goes with polarity. There is service to self, and there is service to others. Okay. Human angelics tend to be service to others. The good aliens who are actually attempting to work with us and protect us are service to others. And because of that, just think in terms of even yourself. You tend to, you know, have a hands-off. You're not trying to manipulate anybody. You're not trying to force them to your will or what have you. It's the ones who are service to self who are actually in it to manipulate and control and to dominate humans. And that tends to be the problem. And then that's complicated by the fact that they're actually the ones who are working with many of the secret governments around the world in terms of the technology exchanges for their own purposes.
Now, let me ask you just a quick question, of course, to satisfy my left brain that just came up. You know, in we all know or define alien again through the movie industry, but in your area, I mean, aren't we all technically, if we're all souls that come into this world, we're technically, in my mind, all aliens of the earth because we're not from here. So how are you using the word alien when you say that aliens are among us? where are
thank
they
you.
from?
It's a good question. I don't see those of us who are human angelics as being alien. We are designated as the sole species that is to occupy this particular quadrant, this particular area of space. When I talk about alien souls, I talk about those souls that, and there are many other alien species, but I talk about those others from the third and or the fifth dimension who are actually infiltrating into this particular area of space, even though this area of space is designated as the home of human angelics.
I see. Okay, so
they
now,
are legal border crossers.
Right. Oh no! Don't get Trump started on that
No,
one.
I know.
Yes, we take that to a whole nother dimension.
Whole nother dimension.
No, I was just adding some humor to it, but I know exactly what you mean.
Well, there is. I mean, it's a very interesting story. If anybody wants to get into it, the System Lords and the 12 Dimensions. I believe it's chapter 10. It gives the entire history of alien sort of interaction with Earth and what really is going on with the alien bioinvasion and the reasons why. And I think it's a very interesting chapter.
Wow. Gene, we really look forward to hearing more about it. And I have read his latest book, and Timeline Collapse and Universal Ascension, and it is incredible. So I want to thank you so much for tuning in today, everybody. And thank you, Gene, for telling your story. It's amazing.
Yes.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you so much, Gene.
Great.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for listening.
You've been listening to Both Sides Now, featuring the unconventional duo Dr. Shirley and Kellee White. Two perspectives, one world.